Hello, welcome to the annual suicide awareness training being offered through Greenbush, the Southeast Kansas Education Service Center. My name is Janelle Hilger-Kopczynski, and I will be reviewing with you the current suggestions when responding to a suicide or suicide risk within your school environment. This presentation is an hour long and comprises of information gathered from many national resources such as the Jason Flatt Foundation, Dr. Bruce Jacobs' recommendations for suicide prevention and intervention in schools, the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, as well as information gathered from the Yellow Ribbon Suicide Prevention Program, the Youth Suicide Prevention Program, the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, and descriptions of intervention skills learned through the ASSIST program, the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. Let's get started. On May 13, 2016, Governor Sam Brownback signed the Jason Flatt Act, Kansas, in memory of Katie House, SB 323, into law, making Kansas the 19th state to pass the Jason Flatt Act since 2007. The bill was sponsored by Senator Greg Smith of Kansas Senate District 21. KSHB 41 Action News covered the bill signing process as Kansas lawmakers approved the suicide awareness training for all staff in the state of Kansas.
Aimed at preventing youth suicide is now headed to the Kansas governor for its final approval.
Over the weekend, the House and Senate unanimously voted for the Jason Flatt Act. It requires free online suicide awareness training for teachers. The Jason Flatt Act is already the law in 18 states. Johnson County mom Kathy House pushed for the law in Kansas after her teenage daughter took her own life.
I really wanted to get involved and make sure that that what happened to Katie and our family, that we could try to prevent this for other families.
The approved bill, SB 323, by lawmakers states, the Board of Education of each school district shall provide suicide awareness and prevention programming to all school staff and shall notify the parents or legal guardians of students enrolled in such school district that training materials provided under such programming are available to such parents or legal guardians. The training statutes include at least 1 hour of training each calendar year based on programs approved by the State Board of Education, a building crisis plan developed for each school building, steps for recognizing suicide ideation, appropriate methods of interventions, and a crisis recovery plan. The Kansas Department of Education reminds districts that suicide ideation is Tier 3 on a school-based mental health continuum. It is recommended that part of the training addresses Tier 1 and Tier 2 issues that may lead to a Tier 3 ideation. Throughout this presentation, we will review the elements of suicide, specifically the protective measures, risk factors, and warning signs to be aware of as it relates to suicide. Let's begin with the current suicide statistics as they pertain to suicide in the state of Kansas. This information can be referenced in the 2016 Kansas Annual Summary of Vital Statistics. Suicide accounted for approximately 16,015 years of potential life lost in 2016. 512 suicide deaths were reported in the state of Kansas in 2016. In 2016, 512 Kansas residents died due to suicide, up 7.3% from 477 suicide deaths in 2015. Almost 4/5, or 78.3% of suicide victims were male. The two age groups with the largest number of suicides were 25 to 34 and 35 to 44. The three most common methods of suicide were firearms, suffocation, and poisoning. Approximately one Kansas died from suicide each day in 2016. The average age of death by suicide was 44.3 in 2016. Suicide remains the second leading cause of death for the 15 to 24 age group. Suicide also remains the second leading cause of death for the 25 to 44 age group. Suicide has risen to the third leading cause of death for the 5 to 14 age group. It is no longer a top 5 leading cause of death for the 45 to 64 age group. It is important to note that due to varying attitudes and beliefs regarding suicide, these numbers do not include unreported suicides. However, picture for a moment a suicide-safer school and the potential life support that could be provided through positive preventative measures. Each suicide behavior may affect a few or a very large number of people, and continued prevention efforts can have everlasting impact on us all. According to Dr. Bruce Jacobs, if a program is to be implemented for detecting students at risk for suicide, it is imperative that there is an infrastructure in the school to respond and that community resources are available. An established crisis team enhances the infrastructure and the process of response via collaborative action, collegial support, and shared responsibility of decision-making. Please familiarize yourself with these recommendations offered by Dr. Jacobs on how to respond to suicidal behavior. Explaining the complexity of suicide is challenging, and often the reasons or attributions stem from an interactive mix of biological, psychological, social, and cultural determinants. Suicidal behavior cannot be predicted and prevented with certainty. However, knowing warning signs, risk factors, and protective factors provides information for assessment and enhances opportunity for preventing suicides. Suicide doesn't start from nothing. There are often contributors. We will review the elements of suicide in regards to risk factors, warning signs, and protective measures. Not every person who suicides is depressed, and vice versa. Suicide is often the result of long-term wearing away or an erosion of a person's ability to cope. Just because one or more of these warning signs and/or risk factors may be present does not mean that that person will take their life, but it is important to be aware of these signs and factors as they are occurring in multiples. Let's take some time to review the elements of suicide, the risk factors, warning signs, and protective measures that can reduce suicide thought and behavior. Health factors, environmental factors, historical factors, and personal characteristics heavily influence a person's vulnerability and risk of suicide, and for some, thoughts of suicide can and will occur. Please take a moment to recognize that these risk factors and specific categories influence a person's vulnerability to suicide. The Yellow Ribbon Suicide Prevention Program suggests that you always trust your gut. If you're concerned about a student, chances are there's a reason and you should err on the side of caution. We don't always get a full picture on our own, which is why we need to build a safety net around the person at risk. Perception is reality to our youth. Outwardly, it may appear that a youth may have a good, strong, supportive family environment and or social support systems. But if they perceive or feel that they cannot confide in or seek help from any of those people, then the reality is that they do not have the support they need. We need to make sure there's a support system in place that helps youth feel comfortable and connected to those around them. Gender identity and sexual orientation, or LGBTQ+ youth, are 4 times more likely, and questioning youth are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide, experience suicidal thoughts, or engage in self-harm more than their straight peers. This is largely due because of the ways they are treated in their homes, schools, communities, and religious institutions. Between 38 to 65% of transgender individuals experience suicidal ideation. According to the Youth Suicide Prevention Program, Native American youth, Latina adolescent girls, foster care youth and alumni, and homeless youth are also at an increased risk for suicide. It is important to remember how your personal values, beliefs, or thoughts regarding suicide may differ from the person at risk you are supporting. Please be informed on where your attitudes lie on the suicide continuum. Warning signs can appear in the way students are talking, acting, and thinking. Be especially mindful of stressful events with feelings of loss. Anything that a person at risk says or does that might give you a gut feeling they're not feeling well and that they are trying to communicate or request a need to explore the suicide, please follow that lead. Be sure to explore the meaning of things you see and hear. Explore invitations. Invitations are a sign of distress that are attempting to invite help, even if they're uninviting by nature. If a person talks about, all my problems will end soon, I just can't think straight anymore, I can't do anything right, no one can do anything to help me now, I just can't take it anymore, with moods that indicate hopelessness, desperation, worthlessness, loss of interest, lonely, anger, fear, or they express a thought about killing themselves, feeling hopeless, having no reason to live, being a burden to others, feeling trapped or having unbearable pain, please be willing, ready, and able to respond. You may not be the person helping long-term. However, as the ASSIST program states, you have a responsibility to support safety for now. Warning signs can be very subtle or very blatant. They are a way for a person that is in a crisis to communicate that they're needing help. You as a gatekeeper should never ignore the warning signs. Trust your instincts. Don't be afraid to act on your concerns. The Yellow Ribbon Program reminds us you don't have to memorize all the warning signs, but if you should witness, hear, or see anyone exhibiting any one or more of these signs, it is cause for immediate response. Contact your school resource officer, administrator, or your local mental health professional or agency. If no one is available at the local level, you can always call the Crisis Distress Center through Headquarters Counseling in Lawrence, Kansas at 785-841-2345. They currently serve 105 counties in the state of Kansas. Or nationally, you may call 273-TALK for additional guidance and help. If you're in a school setting, follow your school and building protocol. Speak to a live person. Do not just leave a message with your colleague. If you can't reach the first contact, move up your list until you do reach a live person. If at all possible, don't leave the person alone and try to remain calm. If you are calm and truly concerned, the individual will tend to remain calm as well. Now we are going to take some time to review common protective measures. Major protective factors against suicide include the following: effective mental health care and implementation of school-based mental health services, connectedness to individuals, family, community, and social institutions, refinement of youth problem-solving skills, coping abilities, and contacts with trusted adults. Let's explore each protective measure a little closer. Connectedness. Students need a sense of security and feeling that they are understood from the people they admire, with also an awareness regarding whose life they want to follow, who they need, and who might need them. Youth need someone to listen to them and show that they really care. Research consistently shows that parents remain a powerful influence on youth to avoid drinking, drug use, violent behavior, and suicide attempts. Connectedness to individuals, family, community, and social institutions are viable lifelines for our youth. It is important that we are examining within our schools frequent opportunities to create and sustain peer-delivered services, extracurricular possibilities and support groups, and implementation of activities in the educational environments that help students increase and strengthen their social networks and connections, ultimately reduce the use of suicide as a coping mechanism to manage their world. Youth Suicide Prevention Program affirms that when students have supportive adults, access to peer support, a connection to a network of resources, a sense of responsibility, and opportunities to contribute, they're more likely to have a future-oriented direction in life. Opportunities for participation in skill building in safe places, supported by caring and trustworthy adults and attuned school policies, leads to cultures of connectedness within our schools. Effective mental health care. Like we have previously stated, it is important to recognize that the person who responds to a student at risk may not be the person helping long-term. However, that person must be ready, willing, and able to respond if a need presents itself. We know that administrators, educators, volunteers, youth workers, and peers are likely to come into contact with students at risk first, and they might serve as a life-preserving resource at that time. Ideally, assessment for suicidal risk should be a collaborative process between more than one health professional within a school environment. Some of those professionals may include an administrator, nurse, psychologist, counselor, social worker, SRO officer, special education teacher, or case manager. It is important to remember that certain experiences may increase risk. Some of those risks include the death or illness of a family member, friend, or community member, including another teen suicide in the community, a loss or sudden change in circumstance, a problem with peers like a breakup, bullying, or conflict with friends, a major stress like failing a test, an unplanned pregnancy, family conflict, being arrested or having interaction with legal systems, being abused, being or feeling socially isolated, having access to firearms or other lethal weapons. The use of school-based mental health services reduces the increased risks. And a clear action plan with steps for disclosures of suicidal thinking with appropriate referrals to community resources is an important protective measure that schools can provide. A student's unique awareness and coping ability influences their vulnerability and risk of suicide. The times a student knows they need a break, when they need to rest, when they need to ask for help, or situations they need to avoid increases their ability to cope with overwhelming feelings or thoughts that evolve through life. Belief systems that the student lives by, that brings that student hope and gets them through their day, that renews their faith and serves as deterrence for consideration of suicide, reduces the risk. Problem-solving skills that leads to the student knowing when they need to take a break, when they might need to make a decision, an awareness of what is good for them, what they need to think about, do or don't do, or choices they should make or not make increases the student's resiliency and ability to identify other means or persons that they may be able to enlist for ongoing support. Contact with trusted adults. As a trusted adult, you have the ability to support the development of relationships between you and adults in the lives of your students. It is important to remember the value of setting limits or boundaries and accept that one person cannot be all things to all people at all times. Access to a variety of other caregivers, professionals, and safety supports can help students navigate their world. Honest communication, mindful reflection, and periodic review of students' stress levels and willingness to listen are some of the most effective preventive measures a trusted adult can provide. By offering ongoing supports that are in place for students on a daily basis, students are more likely to pursue and utilize the helping resources and trusting adults that are near them. Suicide ideation and action continuum. It is important to note that some level of suicidal thinking in adolescence is fairly common, according to Dr. Bruce Jacob. There are many reasons to ask directly about suicide. First, by asking, it clearly communicates that suicide needs to be addressed. Second, should a student be having thoughts or contemplating suicide, you want to know the answer. By asking directly, you're communicating that you don't think less of the person and that their well-being is important to you. If the person is not thinking about suicide, by asking, you're implying the importance of their life and showing that you care, setting the groundwork for creating and maintaining a trustworthy relationship that perhaps the students can enlist in the future if needed. Timing and trust is important when exploring the unique reasons behind suicidal feelings. Active listening of the student's story promotes a more realistic snapshot of current suicide risk. Ideally, one should give enough time first to develop rapport and an understanding of some of the presenting concerns before asking whether the person has considered suicide. The initial assessment will be a matter of determining where the student is along the continuum of suicidal thought to suicidal action. And assessing risk asks direct questions. Ask about how planned, how prepared, and how soon the student is in regards to ending their life. Examples of how to ask those specific direct questions include: do you think about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? When and how often? Have you attempted suicide before? Did you ever try to kill yourself? When, how, and what means did you use? Do you have a plan to hurt yourself now? If so, explore how detailed the plan is by asking about time, place, and means, access, and lethality. In general, the more concrete and detailed a plan is, the greater the risk. There are adolescent suicide risk assessment instruments available that address a variety of risk factors and warning signs that have been tested for validity and reliability. The Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale is a questionnaire used for suicide assessment developed by multiple institutions, including Columbia University with the National Institute of Mental Health Support. This scale is evidence and supported and is a part of a national and international public health initiative involving the assessment of suicidality. However, it is important to note that any assessment tool should be used with caution and only as an adjunct to a comprehensive clinical assessment. Who will ideate versus who will act? As you hear a student's story, you're listening for the student's levels of hope and perhaps ambivalence or even rejection to suicide. It is important to identify the drivers pushing someone to consider suicide, the protective factors preventing them from completing it. Phrases such as, "What was I thinking? I don't want to kill myself," or "If only I can find a way to figure this out," or "I don't know if suicide's the answer, it's all just so confusing," may indicate some hope and potential intent to identify other methods for problem solving. Varying levels of hope will dictate the amount of guidance you will need to provide. If a student has suicidal thoughts with a detailed plan for committing suicide, she or he should be considered high risk and securing immediate supervision for the student as necessary, while also notifying their parents, guardian, and attempting to secure appropriate mental health services and resources is necessary. If the conclusion is that suicide risk remains high, this should then trigger a more comprehensive ongoing risk assessment with the student, parent, guardian, crisis intervention team, and prompt other agencies' involvement. School personnel must realize that the duty to notify a parent trumps student confidentiality. School staff should not promise a student that his or her communication, whether verbal or written, will be confidential. Child Protective Services may be called if child abuse and neglect is suspected, or parents, guardians do not take appropriate action to get a high-risk child the mental health services she or he needs, thus endangering the life of the child. If a student has suicidal thoughts with a detailed plan for suiciding, she or he should be considered high risk. Having access to the means of suicide increases that risk. It's important to realize that somebody seriously considering suicide may knowingly withhold their intentions due to fear, shame, or worry of people's response. If harm is occurring, for example, the student says, I've already taken some pills, and or they can't or are unable to participate in the assessment. For example, they can't engage with you. Something is preventing the intervention, such as they can't form words, they can't de-escalate, or they are reporting that they're seeing or hearing hallucinations. The Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training recommends activating emergency responses and monitoring closely. When securing mental health for a high to moderate risk student, Dr. Bruce Jacobs recommends providing basic information about sources of support, helping the student and family appreciate the need for and the value of the referral, facilitating the student and family in connecting to the referral resource, following up with the student and family and referral resource to determine if the referral decisions were appropriate, and determining follow-through by all involved parties. By explaining to both the student and family that some passing suicidal thoughts are an understandable reaction to a difficult situation, and that these feelings are common and may subside when they get the help and treatment they need, you are supporting the family and appreciating the need for and the value of a mental health referral. Please be mindful of barriers to services such as cost, location, cultural issues, and to optimize the family's decision-making process, assist the student and family in understanding their support options. Staff training in suicide prevention has been shown to significantly reduce suicide rates, and basic first aid training for all staff, families, mental health providers offer obvious benefits. There are several recognized suicide prevention training programs available in the US. Some might include ASSIST, or the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training and Youth Mental Health First Aid Training, the Yellow Ribbon Suicide Prevention Gatekeeper Training for school and community, More Than SAD, which is offered through the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, and SOS, or Signs of Suicide. Those resources and others are available within the state of Kansas. Other resources include the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, Greater Kansas, Kansas Suicide Prevention Resource Center, the Jason Flatt Foundation, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, as well as resources provided through the Kansas State Department of Education. If your school has lost someone to suicide, after a suicide, a toolkit for schools offers best practices and practical tools to help schools in the aftermath of a suicide. This publication can be obtained directly from the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. I would like to conclude today's presentation with this video created by the Mayo Clinic. In this video, it adequately summarizes some of the key points to suicide intervention and prevention we've discussed today. Throughout this video, youth describe common signs that a teen is considering suicide and reinforces the importance of asking the teenager directly, as well as providing empathetic suggestions on what to say with phrases that can offer both help and hope to a teen who may be at risk for suicide. As one teen states in the conclusion of this video, if you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask. Ask straight out.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody.
Might be about to hurt himself.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual...
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
Or getting really mad.
Not able to sleep or sleeping too much.
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
Acting reckless. Drinking, using drugs. Staying out late.
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
Or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed.
Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
that's crazy.
Don't be such a drama queen.
You're making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing
Yourself over. That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad.
How can I help?
We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids. Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead.
I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure.
But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself.
Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts.
Make a list together, right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
In your kid's life.
Based on the Kansas 2013 Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, when young people were asked in Kansas, have you ever had the feeling of hopelessness and sadness for a constant period of 2 weeks or greater during the past 12 months, 24% answered yes. That's almost 1 out of every 4 young people. This equates to 49,968 youth in the state that will have these feelings in the next 12 months if nothing is done differently. When young people were asked in Kansas, have you seriously considered suicide in the past 12 months? 16.4% answered yes. That's 1 out of 6 young people. This equates to 34,145 youth in the state that will consider suicide in the next 12 months if nothing is done differently. When young people were asked in Kansas, have you made a plan to commit suicide in the past 12 months? 12.5% answered yes. That's 1 out of every 8 young people. This equates to 26,025 youth in the state that will make a plan if nothing is done differently. Have you attempted suicide in the past 12 months? 8.4% answered yes. It's 1 out of every 12 young people. This equates to 17,489 youth in the state that will make an attempt in the next 12 months if nothing is done differently. Preventing suicide and suicidal behavior requires that caring adults ask straight out. It also is reliant on the support and contributions of many partners, federal agencies, state and local health departments, nonprofit organizations, and academic institutions to play their part. Thank you for providing the support you do and the role you play in preventing youth suicide. Please feel free to reach out to us directly with any additional comments, questions, or clarification regarding this presentation. Thank you for taking the time to watch our presentation. You can reach out to myself directly, Janelle Hilger-Kopczynski, Crisis Prevention and Response Specialist, through the contact information provided on this screen. You may also visit our website, www.greenbush.org, for additional resources and supports available to assist your district needs. We hope to continue to increase our suicide prevention and responsive efforts and support educators who are committed to doing the same. Thank you. Thank you for accessing the suicide quiz assessing staff knowledge portion of our presentation. This quiz was developed by Urbacher, Singer, and Poland in their Suicide in Schools, a Practitioner's Guide to Multi-Level Prevention, Assessment, Intervention, and Postvention. Please follow along as we review and answer the following questions. Please determine the correct answer. Number 1, in what age group are individuals in the United States most likely to consider suicide? A, 15 to 24 years, B, 25 to 44 years, or C, 45 to 64 years, or D, 65 to 84 years. The correct answer is C, 45 to 64 years is the age group of individuals in the United States most likely to consider suicide. Number 2, are females or males more likely to complete suicide? A, females, B, males, or C, both are the same? The correct answer is B, males. In 2016, almost 4/5, or 78.3% of suicide victims were male in Kansas. Number 3, is it better to not talk about suicide with somebody who may be thinking about it, as this may plant the idea in their heads. True or false? The correct answer is false. Suicide is often the result of long-term wearing away or an erosion of a person's ability to cope. Suicide doesn't start from nothing. There are often contributors. It is valuable to talk about suicide with someone who may be thinking about it, as knowing the person's thought or their detailed plan helps us in having more refined assessment and understanding of the safety supports and guidance we'll need to provide. Number 4, there is usually one sudden or traumatizing event that causes a person to attempt suicide. True or false? The correct answer is false. As we've just described, there's often a long result of wearing away or an erosion on a person's ability to cope. Just because one or more of the warning signs or risk factors may be present does not mean that person will take their life, but it is important to be aware of the signs and factors that are occurring in multiples. Number 5. Which 2 ethnic groups are at a higher risk for suicide? A, Caucasian, B, African American, C, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and D, Asian Pacific Islander. The correct answer is A, Caucasian, and C, American Indian, Alaskan Native are the 2 ethnic groups at a higher risk for suicide. Number 6. The majority of individuals who attempt suicide let someone know about their intentions. True or false? The correct answer is true. Ideally, assessment for suicidal risk should be a collaborative process between more than one health professional within the school. Majority of individuals who attempt suicide also attempted to let someone know about their intentions. Sometimes invitations to discuss suicide are blatant, and other times they are passive. However, if you have a gut feeling or you are seeing or hearing things, invitations are a sign of distress that are attempting to invite help and need to be explored. Number 7. People who are thinking about suicide do so because they really want to die. True or false? False. People who are thinking about suicide do so as they feel they don't have any other options to consider. With the active listening of trustworthy adults, and the access to quality mental health and mental health school-based implementation. Those thinking about suicide may be open to discerning other possible opportunities for problem solving, overwhelming, and intense emotions and thoughts. Number 8, a previous suicide attempt is a serious risk factor for someone completing suicide in the future. True or false? The correct answer is true. A previous suicide attempt or multiple attempts in past history, mental health history, does increase the risk factor for someone completing suicide in the future. Number 9. The only one who can really help a suicidal student is a counselor or mental health professional. True or false? The correct answer is false. Often, administrators, social workers, volunteer, peers, teachers, bus drivers, community members are often the ones to interact with the suicidal student at first. Like we have previously stated, it's important to recognize that the person who responds to a student at risk may not be the person helping long-term. However, that person must be ready, willing, and able to respond if the need presents itself. Educators, administrators, and volunteers are likely to be in contact with those students at risk and serve as a life-preserving resource at the time and help in the assessment and determining if more comprehensive mental health services and professional help is necessary. Number 10, teens who talk about suicide don't complete suicide as they are just seeking attention. True or false? The correct answer is false. Anything that a person at risk says or does that might give you a gut feeling that they're not well and are trying to communicate or request a need to explore suicide should be taken seriously and attention should be provided. Thank you for taking the time to complete a suicide quiz assessing staff knowledge. Again, this quiz was created by Erbacher, Singer, and Poland out of their Suicide in Schools, a Practitioner's Guide to Multi-Level Prevention, Assessment, Intervention, and Postvention. The data and statistics retrieved to create this guide and quiz were from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention and reported from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, as well as Injury Statistics Query and Reporting Systems through their web-based. Dates of the data and statistics were from 2013 and the Injury Statistics Query and Reporting System from 2010. Thank you.